actually on my lunch break from my job, so I just wanted to check in and have the opportunity to meet and figure out, next steps in this weird terrain called the LSAT. It's been a challenge for me for quite some time, and I'm looking to put foot to butt with it to kick it out of the park and go to my dream school of interest.
Fantastic. Well, I'm definitely glad to help. But what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing right now, or the area where you could use support?
Logic games. Um, those tend to be the crux, along with time management. When I find myself getting in the groove of things and feeling like I finally have some control and making sure that the answers are correct, I run out of time. So really looking for keywords and practicing to get into that frame of mind, that mindset, if you will, to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do and kind of looking over my answers and figuring out what went wrong and why.
Sure, understood. Okay, so what does your logic games process look like right now?
At the moment, I would say it's about understanding the rules. What are the rules of the game? Learning how to properly draw the game. Is it sequencing? Is it matching? And then making sure that when I read the rule that I'm getting it, because I find that in my practice that I may set up the game properly, but if I miss how to draft the rule into the game, everything falls apart.
Understood. That happens to a lot of folks. Of course, if one little thing about the rules off, that can affect everything. It has a massive domino effect. So, one way you might adjust your logic games workflow is to take a moment to double check that all the rules are diagrammed correctly. And if you find that you're consistently diagramming them incorrectly, then go back to the fundamentals to see, okay, well, what am I typically missing about certain types of rules?
Definitely, for sure. And I think for me also is trying to figure out when's the best time to take the LSAT. I've taken it plenty of times across a 5 year span. And now with the new rules that the LSAT has about, how many times that you can take it, I just want to make sure that I'm at a place that I'm ready. I feel confident. And when I take it that one time, it's the only time.
Understood. Yeah. Okay. So, what target test are you considering right now?
I'm kind of looking at next year. I'm not looking to take it right away just because I'm currently doing my doctorate. I'm graduating in July, and I want to be able to dedicate the appropriate timeline to go through each part of the test piece by piece. And in knowing that LSAT Flex is going to go into 2022, at least I hope, it'll reduce less pressure to kind of take the test knowing that I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've got some good news for you. LSAC made an announcement last week about the LSAT continuing online. So they're not calling it the LSAT Flex after June, but it still will be pretty much the same, except they're adding in one unscored experimental section. You won't know which one it is on test day. They're adding that in starting in August. So it'll be one section longer, but it'll still be online at home. You'll get a break between sections 2 and 3. And so I hope that reduces some of the anxiety around the format changing more drastically than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think my curiosity would kind of be what were what were the variables that were into play for the experimental section to be added now since things have been kind of consistent since the pandemic began?
Yeah, well, I think, and LSAC probably won't say too much more about this, but my guess is that is a pretty reasonable one, I think, which is that they need a way to test out future questions. The LSAT actually, for the majority of its history, they would always give an experimental section. What we've had with the Flex since COVID began is basically the unique situation to not have an experimental section. I think that was basically they didn't want to make the test too long because they didn't want to allow a bathroom break. But now with 4 sections, human body has limitations.
Of course.
They want to give people the bathroom break, and so they're adding in. They need to add the experimental section because they've only got so many tests in the bank. They need to be able to develop new questions, and experimentals administering those is part of that process. But speaking now in February, you're talking about taking the LSAT next year. I just want to acknowledge you for that decision because so many people want to knock this out in just a couple of months when it really is important enough that it warrants more time considering how big a factor it is in the admissions process. So I'm
Absolutely.
glad you're taking it slow.
Of course, I think that one of the advantages in my time of like knowing the LSAT is that I used to be that student. I used to be that person to be like, I need to take the LSAT right now. And the lesson that I learned from that is haste makes waste. And when you take the LSAT so many times, even though LSAT, like law schools, they look at the fact of, this is the most recent score. I've also had feedback from admissions where it's just like they don't average the scores, but they take a look to see where you were and where you're at now. And if they don't see that much of a difference, it does get weighted into whether or not you're a waitlisted candidate versus being admitted. And that's kind of my worry, is that I don't want to repeat that process. I want to make sure that I'm looking at what the median score is for law schools, making sure that I'm either hitting the median or at least at minimum the 25th scoring percentile to give me a fighting chance. And I think with my well-roundedness on my resume, I do have a decent shot. It's just this one thing called the LSAT kind of getting in the way of that.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I can understand the impulse there. You want to get it right when you ultimately take it and, of course, get the highest score possible. You don't want to have more takes on your record than you need. And I know you said you took it before and there's the retake limits to consider. And so now you're taking it slower. I mean, ultimately, they'll care about the score in the end, but there are retake limits that went into effect last year. You don't want to take it more times than you need. And so if you want to make sure that you're solidly above the 25th percentile, if not higher, then it takes some time, especially if you have other obligations going on like the doctorate.
For sure.
And so one thing I want to circle back to for a moment, we talked about earlier, is that logic games flow, slowing it down, because you've got games, reasoning, and reading comp, all of which I'd imagine you want to master. And so it's going to take the time to look at each individual piece and recognize when you get something wrong about a game, why you get it wrong. Was it misreading a rule? Was it not making maximal use of your previous diagrams? Was it not making enough inferences up front? For every game that gives you trouble, reviewing that game, and you can use explanations if you want, but ultimately it's about figuring out where in your process is there room for improvement and room for growth, and take that insight and apply it to all the games you may encounter in the future.
Absolutely. Knowing that we're kind of almost at time, I think one of the questions that I do want to ask in terms of recommendations would be, how would you go about, and I've seen your videos, I've seen, other students ask this question, but I think it's a little more relatable to me, is how do you plan your time of studying when you're doing a doctorate, when you're working a full-time position, and your week and your weekends look real slim? Because I know that this is a process that requires endurance and dedication, and make no mistake, like this is on my agenda for a very long time. What steps, how would you navigate a schedule as complicated as mine, but still being able to be alert to practice and do the work?
It's a fantastic question. Yeah. And kudos to you for juggling all the things you've got going on already, let alone the LSAT on top of that. I get it. So what would you say is the time that you're most alert in the day?
I would say now. Right now, my time would be from 12 to 3. And sometimes when I get out of work, I'm skeptical of trying to do things after work because I'm already kind of exhausted with the day, and I want to dedicate the time when I'm most awake and aware.
Yeah, the LSAT requires that you be awake and aware. If you're tired, if you're feeling sleepy, if you're feeling burnt out, and it's late in the evening, for example, then you're not going to get the full benefit out of it. And then it can be frustrating to put in LSAT time, but just be getting the questions wrong. So my suggestion for you would be use that 12 to 3 time when you can. Of course, you also may want to use that alert time for your full-time job or for the doctoral thesis and such and other work related. But if there's not a pressing deadline for one of those other obligations you have, you may want to carve out maybe one day a week to focus on the LSAT specifically. So maybe Fridays from 12 to 3, you block it off on your calendar. That is LSAT time. If you have a deadline Friday 5 p.m. Friday 5 p.m., then maybe you'll want to switch that day that week, or maybe take that week away from the LSAT. But I would love for you to be able to at least carve out 10 minutes a day. If that's it, 10 minutes a day, maybe 12 to 12:10 each day, that's your LSAT time. And then you still have 2 hours and 50 minutes for all the other more pressing things. But your LSAT, we're speaking now in February, you said next year. So you've got approximately 11 months at minimum to knock out the LSAT and conquer it one piece at a time. But I would love for you to be able to do at least one LSAT problem a day, or one logic game a day, maybe, so that you're keeping the momentum going for this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so, so much. This is definitely insightful, and I look forward to the journey.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.